The snow fell in thick curtains outside the glass tower as Henry stepped into the elevator. At 37, he'd mastered the art of late nights, the relentless strategy sessions that had built his tech empire from nothing. His dark hair, meticulously styled that morning, now fell slightly across his forehead. His charcoal overcoat hung open, revealing the perfectly tailored suit beneath. Success had arrived on schedule for Henry, but somewhere in the climb, he'd stopped noticing what he'd left behind. Please kindly like, comment, share, and subscribe to Linda's Hot Stories. Also, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from today. What country or city are you watching from? He was scrolling through his phone, already composing tomorrow's agenda in his mind, when he heard it, a voice so small it barely registered above the wind. "Sir." Henry glanced up to find a little girl standing at the building's entrance, no more than 4 years old. She had reddish-brown curls spilling from beneath a threadbare pink hat, her cheeks flushed crimson from the cold. She wore a puffy lavender coat with a torn pocket, tiny rain boots caked with slush, and a green backpack that seemed too heavy for her small frame. Her eyes, bright blue and impossibly wide, held something Henry hadn't seen in years of boardroom negotiations, pure, unfiltered terror. "Are you lost?" he asked, his executive instincts shifting to the immediate problem. He crouched down, the snow-dusted concrete cold through his trousers, though he barely registered it. The little girl's chin trembled. "My sick mom didn't wake up." The words landed like a hammer blow to Henry's chest. "What do you mean she didn't wake up?" His voice came out sharper than intended. "Where is she?" "At home. I shaked her and shaked her, but she won't get up. She's on the floor." Tears carved tracks down the child's round face. "I got really scared. Mommy told me, she said if something bad happens, go outside and find a grown-up. But everyone keeps walking." Henry's mind snapped into crisis mode. That same razor focus he deployed during hostile takeovers now locked onto this child. "What's your name?" "Amelia." "Amelia. I'm Henry. Can you take me to your mom right now?" The little girl nodded, her small mitten-covered hand reaching up with a trust that made something twist painfully in Henry's chest. Her fingers were ice-cold even through the worn fabric. She led him down the sidewalk, away from the gleaming financial district. Block by block, the buildings grew shorter, the streetlights dimmer, the sidewalks more cracked. They turned into a neighborhood where windows showed peeling paint instead of holiday decorations, where front steps sagged under years of neglect. Amelia stopped at a narrow brick building with a crooked 3 hanging beside the door. She produced a key from inside her coat, fingers fumbling with the lock until Henry's steadier hands took over. 2 flights up. Wallpaper curling at the edges. Carpet worn to threads in the center of each step. The apartment door swung open to reveal a space barely larger than Henry's walk-in closet, but clean, he noticed. Carefully maintained. A small bookshelf held worn picture books. Crayon drawings covered one wall. And there, beside a threadbare couch, lay a young woman, motionless on the floor. Henry dropped to his knees beside the woman, his fingers finding her neck, searching for a pulse. There, faint but steady, thank God. She was young, maybe 30, with light brown hair pulled back in a messy bun. Even unconscious, exhaustion had carved shadows beneath her eyes, etched lines around her mouth that didn't belong on someone so young. Her skin was clammy, burning with fever. "I need to call for help, Amelia." "Okay," the little girl whispered. Henry yanked out his phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. As he relayed the address, his gaze swept the room with the same analytical precision he applied to failing companies. A stack of medical bills on the kitchen counter, all stamped, "Past due," in angry red letters. Empty prescription bottles lined up beside the sink, at least 5 of them. A calendar hung on the wall, every day crammed with careful handwriting. Morning shift, evening shift, double shift marked in red. The evidence assembled itself into a devastating picture. This woman, Rose, he assumed, had worked herself into the ground trying to survive. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. Henry stood back, still holding Amelia's hand, watching them work with professional efficiency that did nothing to calm the hammering in his chest. St. Mary's emergency room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Henry sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, Amelia curled against his side, her small hand locked around 2 of his fingers. A nurse had brought apple juice and crackers, but they sat untouched on the side table. Severe pneumonia complicated by exhaustion and malnutrition, the doctor had explained. Her immune system was completely compromised. Another few hours and he'd left the rest unsaid. "Do you have family, sweetheart?" Henry asked gently. "Grandparents? An aunt?" Amelia shook her head against his coat. "Just Mommy. My daddy left before I was born." The words hit harder than they should have. A tired-looking woman with a clipboard approached. "I'm Mrs. Chen. Social Services. Given the circumstances, we'll need to place Amelia in temporary foster care until her mother recovers." "No." The word came out with boardroom authority. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Blake. Henry Blake. And no, you're not taking her." He felt Amelia press closer. "This child just saved her mother's life. I'm not letting her be traumatized further by strangers. We have protocols. Then I'll hire lawyers who specialize in dismantling protocols." Henry's voice dropped to the tone that made executives reconsider hostile positions. "Make it work." 2 hours and 3 phone calls later, they did. They were allowed 5 minutes in Rose's room. She looked impossibly fragile against the white sheets, oxygen tubing in her nose, IVs threading from both arms. But her eyes, dark brown and alert, tracked Amelia the moment the door opened. "Baby," she whispered, and Amelia broke free from Henry's hand, scrambling onto the bed with practiced care. "Mommy, you're awake. I found help, just like you said. This is Mr. Henry." Rose's gaze lifted to meet his over her daughter's head. In that look, Henry saw everything. The crushing shame of a mother who'd collapsed, the desperate gratitude toward a stranger, the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd sacrifice anything for their child. It reminded him painfully of his own mother, gone 10 years now, who'd worked herself to exhaustion raising him alone. "I'll keep her safe," Henry said quietly, the promise settling in his chest like an anchor. "I'll bring her to visit every day. You focus on getting well." Rose reached out a trembling hand. Henry took it, her grip weak but her eyes burning with intensity. "Thank you," she breathed. "I don't know why you're doing this." "Neither do I," Henry admitted. But somewhere between that snowy sidewalk and this sterile room, something dormant inside him had cracked open. Henry's penthouse had always felt sophisticated. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sleek furniture in monochrome tones, smart home technology responding to his every command. Now, watching Amelia stand frozen in the entrance, her backpack still strapped to her shoulders, it felt like a museum. Cold. Lifeless. Sterile. "Are you hungry?" he asked, then remembered his refrigerator contained leftover sushi, imported beer, and protein shakes. Amelia shook her head. "I'm really sleepy. But I don't have my bed. I have a guest room. Come on." He led her down the hall to a room decorated in whites and grays, designed for business associates who never visited. The king-sized bed dominated the space, its stark white comforter pulled tight. Amelia stared at it, then looked up at him with those impossibly blue eyes. "It's too big. I'll get lost." Henry looked at the bed, then at the tiny girl who'd walked through a snowstorm to save her mother. Without thinking, he grabbed pillows from the bed and an extra blanket from the closet. He spread them on the plush carpet beside the bed frame, creating a small nest. "How about this?" Amelia's face brightened for the first time all night. "Like camping." "Exactly like camping." Amelia burrowed into the makeshift bed, still wearing her dress, too exhausted for anything else. Henry turned to leave, but her small voice stopped him. "Mr. Henry? Can you stay till I'm asleep? Mommy always stays." He settled onto the floor beside her nest of blankets, his back against the bed frame, his expensive suit wrinkling against the carpet. "Mommy sings to me," Amelia whispered, her eyes already drooping. "Do you know any songs?" Henry's throat tightened. He hadn't sung since his mother died. 10 years of silence. But looking at this brave little girl who'd walked through snow and fear to save the person she loved most, he found himself reaching back into memory. The lullaby came haltingly at first, half-forgotten words his mother had sung to him. His voice cracked on the high notes, rusty from disuse, but Amelia's hand found his and held tight. Her breathing evened out within minutes, but Henry stayed. He watched her small chest rise and fall, her curls spread across the pillow, her fingers still wrapped around his. Something inside him, something he'd carefully locked away after too much loss, finally broke open. And for the first time in a decade, Henry felt tears on his face. Henry made the call at 6 a.m., still sitting on the floor beside Amelia's sleeping form. "Cancel everything for the week," he told his assistant. "The Shanghai deal, the board meeting, all of it." "Sir, the investors can wait. They'll have to wait." 3 hours later, he stood in the children's section of Target, completely out of his depth. He'd negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, but deciphering the difference between 4T and 5T felt impossibly complex. A patient sales associate helped him fill a cart. Practical clothes, pajamas with cartoon characters, a purple toothbrush that lit up. In the grocery aisle, Amelia pointed at dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. "Mommy gets these sometimes, for special." "Then we're getting 3 boxes," Henry decided, tossing them in. They added macaroni and cheese, strawberries, juice boxes, foods Henry hadn't thought about in decades. At checkout, Amelia insisted on helping load items onto the conveyor belt, concentrating fiercely on each placement. Henry found himself smiling. Actually smiling, not the practiced expression he wore for investors, but something genuine. For the first time since he couldn't remember when, he wasn't thinking about market shares or quarterly projections. He was just present. And it felt like breathing after years underwater. The hospital visits became their routine. Every afternoon, Henry and Amelia arrived with drawings and stories about their day. Rose grew stronger each visit, color returning to her cheeks, though the exhaustion in her eyes ran deeper than any illness. On the 4th day, while Amelia napped in the chair, Rose finally told her story. She'd been 19 when she got pregnant, a sophomore in college with dreams of becoming a teacher. Amelia's father had left the day she told him, leaving behind nothing but a forwarded address that bounced back. "I dropped out to work," Rose said quietly, staring at her hands. "Thought I'd go back eventually, but rent kept going up. Childcare costs more than most people make. So I worked doubles, triples when I could get them. 3 jobs some months." Her voice cracked. "I tried so hard to give her a normal childhood, but I couldn't even afford to stay healthy." Henry recognized the story. Different details, same desperate mathematics. His own mother had made those same impossible calculations. "You're putting your child first," he said firmly. "You're sacrificing everything so she has a chance at more. That's not failure, Rose. That's everything that matters." Rose was discharged on day 7. Henry drove them back to collect belongings from the tiny apartment, then took a breath he'd been holding for days. "I own a building in Riverside," he said carefully. "Good schools. Safe neighborhood. There's a 2-bedroom unit that's been vacant. And I need someone to manage the property, collect rent, coordinate maintenance, be on site for tenants." Rose stared at him. "Henry, the job comes with health insurance. Full coverage. Flexible hours so you're there when Amelia gets home from school. The salary is $60,000. I can't accept charity. It's not charity." Henry's voice roughened with emotion he couldn't quite hide. "That night on the sidewalk, I was successful by every measure that's supposed to matter. And I was completely empty. Amelia saved my life too, Rose. I'm offering all of us a chance to build something real." Rose's eyes filled with tears, but her chin lifted with fierce pride. "I'll pay rent. Not market rate but something. And I'll earn that job, Henry. I won't be a project." "Minimal rent," Henry countered. "And you'll earn every penny, I promise." Rose extended her hand. "Partners, then." Henry shook it, sealing something that felt more binding than any contract he'd ever signed. 3 months later, Henry sat in a too-small auditorium chair, wedged between Rose and a dozen other parents, watching tiny ballerinas stumble through a rehearsed routine. Amelia, wearing a pink tutu and concentrated determination, spotted them in the 3rd row and waved so enthusiastically she nearly collided with another dancer. Henry's phone buzzed. An email marked urgent. The Singapore investors threatening to walk. 6 months ago, he would have stepped into the hallway, spent the intermission doing damage control. He glanced at the screen and turned it face down. Rose noticed, smiled knowingly. "The Empire can wait?" "The Empire can definitely wait." Amelia finished with a dramatic bow, grinning wider than her face should allow. Henry realized his chest ached, not from stress or exhaustion, but from something he'd thought he'd lost the capacity to feel. Joy. Simple, uncomplicated joy. Later, driving them home through streets no longer divided by invisible economic borders, Amelia piped up from the back seat. "Remember that snowy night when I found you, Mr. Henry?" Henry caught Rose's eye, saw his own emotion reflected there. "Actually, sweetheart," he said softly, "that was the night you both found me." If this story resonated with you, we'd be grateful if you take a moment to like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe to Linda's Hot Stories. Your engagement allows us to continue sharing meaningful stories that inspire. Before you leave, we'd love to hear from you. What did you learn from this story?